Okay, today we're going to be talking about finding patterns, okay? So patterns in sequences. This is how we can figure out the next terms. So basically when we look at a sequence, we want to try to figure out what's happening between each of these sequences so that we can then figure out the next terms. So we're trying to figure out what's happening so we can establish a pattern. Okay, so first thing you look for is if it's arithmetic or geometric, so you're looking to see if it's adding or subtracting or multiplying, dividing by the same number. Okay, those are generally the easier sequences to understand, but sometimes when we're finding the pattern, that's not going to be the case. So if we look at number 1, it goes from 0 to 2, which would be adding 2, because if you multiplied 0 by 2, you'd still get 0. So it's adding 2. So we're adding 2 here, between here and here. And then if we keep going, 2 to 6, it's not adding 2 anymore, it's adding 4. Okay, so just right off the bat, I can tell it's not going to be an arithmetic or geometric sequence. It's going to be something else. Okay, so this is just one that I just need to figure out what the pattern is so that I can continue write the next 4 terms here. Okay. So we went 2 to 4, and then the next one, 6 to 14, is going up by 8. So if I look at the differences, I can kind of see a pattern here, right? If it goes from 2 to 4 to 8, then what am I doing each time? I'm doubling what I add by. So the next time I would add by 16, and then I would add by 32, then I'd add by 64, and then the last thing I would do is add by 128. Okay, so now I need to figure out what those numbers are. So if I take 14 and I add 16, I get 30, right? So the next term is going to be 30. Then when I add 32, I'm going to get 62. Then when I add 64, I'm going to get 126. And then when I add 128 to 126, I'm going to get 252. Okay, so that's how I did the first term there. Again, if it's not adding, multiplying, dividing, subtracting by the same number, then you need to look at the differences to figure out the pattern. So in this case, the pattern was in the differences, not necessarily the terms in the sequence. Okay, next one. It should be a pretty easy one to spot what's happening. It goes from negative 20 to negative 40, negative 60, negative 80. We are going down by 20 each time. So we're subtracting 20 is the pattern. So the next one would be negative 100, then it'll be negative 120, then it'll be negative 140, then it'll be negative 160. Okay? Then we come down to this one here. It goes 10, 20, 40, 80. So, I mean, I can see the pattern right away, but let's eliminate some of our possibilities. So if we look at the sequence, if it's going up, that means you're either adding or multiplying by something, okay? If it's going down, that means you're subtracting or dividing. This is obviously going up. It's getting to be bigger numbers. So 10 to 20 would be adding 10, 20 to 40 be adding 20. But if we look at it as multiplying, there is going to be a pattern there when you're adding, but if you are multiplying, if you multiply 10 by something, you would get 20, right? What would you multiply? You'd multiply by 2. So what if I multiply 20 by 2? I'd get 40. If I multiply 40 by 2, I'd get 80. So each time you're just multiplying it by 2. Okay, so that's your pattern. So then, all you do to figure out your next terms are multiply them by 2 to get your next term. So 80 times 2 is 160. That times 2 would be 320. Times 2 would be 640. Times 2 would be, just make sure I get this right, 1280. And that would be the next 4 terms. Okay. Then come down to this last one. If I look at this one, it's going up, so it's either adding or multiplying. So the only way to get 4 from 1 would be to, if I was multiplying, would be to multiply by 4, but obviously if I multiply 4 by 4, I'm not going to get 9, so it's not multiplying. So let's check adding. So 1 to 4 would be adding 3, But if you add 3 to 4, you're not going to get 9. So this is one, just like the first one, where I have to look at the differences. Okay, so let's look at our difference to figure out our pattern. So I'm adding 3 this time. Next time, 4 to 9 would be adding 5. And then 9 to 16 would be adding 7. Do I see a pattern here? 3, 5, 7. Going up by an additional 2, or going up by odds, basically. So the next one I would add by is 9. Then I'd add by 11, then I'd add by 13, then the last one I would add is by 15. So 16 plus 9 is going to be 25. 25 plus 11 is going to be 36. 36 plus 13 is going to be 49. And then 49 plus 15 is going to be 64. Okay, and that is patterns.